You're listening to Chicago Stories, a podcast from City Hall featuring the stories of everyday Chicagoans, as told to Mayor Emanuel.
This is Chicago Stories. We're joined by Professor Posner, who is from the University of Chicago and just wrote a very influential piece, one of many, but this one was on the Logan Act at in the New York Times. Now, I want to make sure I have this right. You went to Harvard Law School, Yale undergraduate and master's in philosophy, started a magazine called The New Rambler, literary criticism. So what makes you an underachiever? What are you doing with your life?
Well, I went on a climbing wall recently.
A climbing wall?
I went up a climbing wall, and I injured both of my arms simultaneously trying to do this. So maybe I'm lagging in that.
Maybe. Well, yeah. Of all the things that, what drove you? That's not why I asked you to be in for the interview, but what drove you to try that height and that task? Do you have kids?
I have kids.
How old?
16.
There. Okay, we have the answer.
21.
Did they egg you on?
A little bit.
Yeah.
They came. They did very well. They didn't hurt themselves either.
I have a 20, 18, and 17, so I know that.
And your daughter Leah and my son Jacob know each other in that school.
Yeah. So what got you to write this? And I think we should probably lay a little foundation. The Logan Act. What was the impetus behind that? And in that process, if you just explain for some people the Logan Act who may not be familiar.
Right. The Logan Act is a statute passed a very long time ago that basically says that private citizens are not supposed to interfere with foreign policy. So if the president wants to do something, private citizens aren't supposed to go abroad and try to undermine it.
Who's the Logan Act named after?
George Logan.
What year?
1799.
What was the impetus behind it?
Well, George Logan was actually the bad guy. He wasn't the sponsor. George Logan was a Jeffersonian Federalist who traveled to France to try to persuade the French to release some American sailors who they had captured and to eliminate an embargo on American goods. And he was apparently successful, or at least helpful. But the people who were in government at the time, this was John Adams, they were called Federalists. They were opponents of the Jeffersonian Republicans. And so they got angry at Logan for interfering with that. And I think understandably, because they had their own negotiators and they were trying to do whatever they wanted to do. So when Logan got back, the Federalists in power got very angry at him, and they passed this statute called the Logan Act to prohibit him and people like him. Yeah, freelancing, exactly. You want your foreign policy to be, accomplished by the president, not by ordinary people who usually just try to make mischief. And there were some newspaper reports suggesting that some members of President Trump's transition team did do something like that before President Trump formally took office on January 20th, including apparently trying to persuade the Russians to veto a UN resolution and some other things as well. So it looks like that these people actually broke the law, committed a crime. But in the press and a lot of op-eds, people are saying, well, the Logan Act is really not a serious law because it's actually never been enforced against anybody. And the main reason that I wrote this op-ed with a colleague of mine named Daniel Hemmel is that we wanted to make it clear that one of the main reasons that the Logan Act has never been enforced before is that no one's actually seriously violated it before, with the possible exception of President Nixon. But
I'm going to get there in a second.
Yeah. So it's actually an important law. It makes a lot of sense. And if Michael Flynn or any other transition team member did try to negotiate a deal with a foreign country before President Trump became president, then he should be prosecuted.
Well, there is all these recent documents about Nixon and Haldeman coming out from the transition of '68. Why do you think that it was never, I know they try to block it, but why do you think it wasn't either prosecuted, used as a tool back in 60. It's not like it wasn't new because it was talked about Nixon's backhanded efforts even back then and currently, concurrent with the act itself.
So no one knew about it except for Lyndon Johnson and a few of his people. And Lyndon Johnson thought this was treason, but he also thought that there wasn't strong enough evidence that he could launch a serious prosecution of someone who had just been elected president. So politically, it was impractical. The extent to which Nixon interfered with...
I would just like to say that never violated Johnson and doing that in some other cases.
Yeah, that's true.
The rare moment he showed restraint,
But he was on his way out, and he was pretty unpopular as well.
Yeah.
It would have looked bad. But I also think that the extent to which Nixon really did something very bad, which was interfere with peace negotiations with North Vietnam, did not come out until much later. And so there wasn't a general knowledge that he had done this. So that's why there wasn't a prosecution.
Do you think, so when you look at this, besides it being on the books and therefore probably because nobody prosecuted it doesn't mean it's not a useful tool, it's probably because it's actually been an effective tool as a warning sign. I remember we said it rhetorically during the Obama transition, one president at a time, and there were a lot of foreign policy decisions made that and it's not new to have other governments contact transition. Right. So what do you think is different here?
The deal, that
the deal being
that apparently, again, the evidence remains murky at this point, but it's one thing if President Trump had just announced, we disagree with the Obama administration on these issues, and they announced it to the world and put other countries on notice that the Trump administration would take a different action. It's quite another thing to try to persuade Russia while President Obama is still in office to act in a way that's contrary to President Obama's foreign policy. So in particular, if the question was a UN vote that was going to take place while President Obama was still in office, it would be wrong to try to make a deal with the Russians or to promise some benefit to the Russians once President Trump came into office in return for their doing something that is contrary to what President Obama wished at the time.
Can you use the Logan Act now for anything the National Security Advisor Flynn did during the transition as it relates to Turkey, not Russia? What you know about the information there as it relates to both his economic interests and acts as it relates to one individual up in Pennsylvania? I can't. I said that because I can't pronounce it correctly, and I don't want to make a mess of that.
So, yes. Often, statutes overlap with each other, and to the extent that Flynn engaged in something that just enriched him, it doesn't make sense to use the Logan Act. You can use bribery statutes or other types of statutes that prohibit corruption.
So based on what you know, and I know a lot of it's murky and you don't know everything that Mueller's got and his staff has, where do you see this going, the investigation by Mueller?
Oh, well, I think Mueller will bring more indictments. And then there might be some more plea bargains. And he could charge Flynn with other actions if Flynn is not cooperative. There might be other people on the Trump transition team who broke the law. And at some point, Mueller will issue a report. Well, he may not issue a report. It's not clear exactly what he'll do. But I think the most likely thing is that he will charge members of the transition team who have violated crimes or very likely violated a crime. I don't think he's going to indict Trump. But I think the charges that he brings may or may not implicate Trump. And if they do implicate Trump, then it'll be up to Congress to decide what to do about it.
Well, there's another issue then, because you weighed in on the Logan Act. And the other issue is, and it's kind of, it's obviously a current event, can a president actually obstruct justice?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Why do you believe? Not that whatever you say. Remember, I'm not a lawyer, so
right. I'll just make things up.
Yeah, you can make them up. It's just me and you. I'm a jury of one, and that sounds good. That makes it no. But in a serious case, can a president be? I don't know if I would say convicted, but can he be charged with obstructing justice?
Yes, I think so.
And why?
Okay, so the president has the authority to order an FBI director to drop an investigation or to fire him.
He does.
He does. So he has that authority, constitutional authority. But he's not allowed, and I just want to draw an analogy to bribery. So suppose someone gave...
Just to pick one crime out of that, out of a handpick of crimes, yes.
Because bribery it's a little easier to understand. If somebody gave the president money in order to drop a case, we would all agree he's violated the crime of, he's committed the crime of bribery. In the case of obstruction of justice, the president drops the case because he wants to protect himself or his aides or his family. And the motive here is contrary to the public interest. It's just to advance his own personal goal, just the way bribery is. And that's a crime. There are statutes, and there's statutes that say obstruction of justice is illegal. Anyone can get in very big trouble for obstructing justice.
Is there case history?
Not against the president.
I just wanted to prove I knew that term. I don't really know what that means, but it sounded really good.
Well,
But on a serious note, is there case history?
For individuals, yes. For presidents, both Nixon and Clinton were charged with obstruction of justice. Nixon in the House Judiciary Committee voted out articles of impeachment. He resigned. But one of them was for obstruction of justice. And for Clinton was actually sanctioned for a very similar violation called, in this case it was contempt of court because he lied to a court, and the judge actually sanctioned him after he left office. So yes, there is precedent for the notion that the president could commit the crime of obstruction of justice. There's no precedent for a president actually being prosecuted while in office. I don't think that would happen. It's possible for a president to be prosecuted after he leaves office for crimes that he committed while in office. Even the executive branch lawyers seem to agree about that. And then, of course, there's the remedy of impeachment.
So, based on what you know from the conversations, at least, is what's in the public domain, on the firing of Comey, and why he fired him, and what you know from emails and other communication, do you think there's a basis for that?
Oh, definitely. I think firing...
Well, you say that so surely, which I would like you to know I have an emotional appeal to right now. But so definitely, so why do you think that?
Well, because Trump has more or less admitted that he fired Comey in order to prevent the FBI from, or to put it a little more precisely, he asked Comey to ease off on Flynn. Comey clearly was not going to do that, and Trump fired him. And he more or less admitted that he fired him because Trump fired Comey because Comey was going to continue to pursue this investigation. And that now I guess the real question is, Trump could argue that, well, he thought this was a waste of resources and a witch hunt. And if you believe that, then it wasn't obstruction of justice. If you believe that the real reason that Trump fired Comey was that Comey would embarrass Trump by indicting Flynn or find out things about Trump that Trump did not want, that would be obstruction of justice. And I think that's plausible. I don't know in the end whether that's true, but I think it's quite plausible that this was obstruction of justice.
Well, that would be a big charge.
Yeah, although it's hard to believe Mueller would actually
pull that trigger. Yeah,
I think but what he might do is he might, in the course of charging other people, implicate Trump.
Is that where you see this going?
Yeah, I think so. It depends. I mean, Trump's transition team and his other aides may have acted without his knowledge and against his wishes, and then Trump would not be implicated if that's the case. But if he told them to do these things, which, he probably did to some extent.
The one thing is a minor thing, but I've always, actually there's two minor things that I wouldn't say irritate me. I found this, Donald Trump says he was talking to his father, and the two lawyers were, quote unquote, for both Donald Trump and for Donald Trump Jr. were both on the phone. And he's using the fact that the lawyers were on the phone to say it's attorney-client privilege, even though it's a father and son talking. Is that a legitimate claim of lawyer-client privilege?
I don't think it could possibly be, because then you could always avoid any kind of judicial inquiry by just having lawyers in the room all the time. And attorney-client privilege is more focused on a lawyer giving advice to a client after the client has revealed, disclosed certain facts to the lawyer. I don't know the details of the law very well, but that seems quite a strange claim to me.
Did you have a epiphany, or did you always start this from the day one after Trump got elected, given what you started to learn, that there were violations here, or did at some point you became increasingly more skeptical of the claims being made by both Donald Trump himself and President Trump, rather, and the administration and spokesman?
I'm trying
to flush out your politics here.
Oh, my politics.
That was my subtle way.
No, I mean, I'm a kind of a middle of the road person who's voted for presidents of both parties, but I'll admit I was skeptical about Trump from the beginning.
Okay.
And
he's giving you nothing to reassure you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I didn't have any expectation that he would break the law once he became president, but he clearly, would tell lies quite frequently while a candidate. And so at some point, I just decided I'm not going to believe him. But it didn't follow from that I thought, he was going to break the law. And I do think it is a little unclear still the extent to which he's broken the law, how important his law breaking has been. All those things are important if you're going to evaluate a president.
Well, I mean, I will say this, having worked for two presidents, before a prosecutor or in this case, a special prosecutor, Mueller, takes a case, they are going to think not just twice, multiple times before they trip over into anything inside the Oval Office and the person inside that office.
Yes.
They don't take that. I mean, I do know Mr. Mueller. They don't take that lightly.
Yes. And, if you look at the history of special prosecutors and independent counsels, most of them, didn't go that far. They would say, yeah, we took a look and there's no crime here. And not, with respect to cabinet level officials and so forth, there have been dozens of investigations. Some of them don't end up anywhere. Some of them do lead to indictments. I think they take their position pretty carefully in that they don't want to indict anybody, really, not just the president, but really anyone, unless they have a very strong case.
Have you ever seen a situation where they're going after the Justice Department and FBI like this, out of Congress? And I will tell you, I've been unhappy with both the Justice Department and FBI and different other situations working in Congress and the White House under the. I've never seen anything like this. This is new territory. Or am I painting? No, I don't think we did that like this.
After Starr, after Ken Starr. I mean, I don't think it's like this, but it is true. And I don't want to say Bill Clinton, but it's true that many Democrats attacked Ken Starr. And there were legitimate reasons to criticize him.
You're not kidding. No.
Right.
No.
There were legitimate reasons to criticize him. He made mistakes, which he's acknowledged now. But there definitely was criticism of him on the Democratic side. But I
don't remember anybody ever calling for an investigation of the special prosecutor or the attorney general.
I think
or
for leaks maybe. I mean, look, there is definitely a difference in magnitude. Right. But there is an element of truth here that I will say in defense of the Trump administration, which is that the special counsel or the independent counsel in the case of Clinton, these people have a lot of power. There isn't a huge amount of accountability. They're not elected officials, and we should hold them to a high standard. Right. And if we think they're leaking or doing other things that are improper, we should criticize them. I do think that the attack. I frankly don't get this stuff about the FBI agent. He fired the FBI agent. I mean, FBI agents, they have political views. They have to, right or left. And I'm not sure. I think it's the current attack on Mueller it goes way too far. But I don't think it's wrong for people to be critical about special prosecutors.
I'll call you professor or doctor, whatever you would like. But what made you start a literary? I mean, it's not like you have a lot of you have kids. Yeah. You have a full-time job doing legal work. What made you start Literary Criticism magazine? Well,
the reason was the immediate reason was the New Republic, back in the old days before all the scandals, had a very nice section of book reviews, and it was important, I think, especially in the academic world, when people publish books, to have some kind of general discussion of them. They're not going to be reviewed in the New York Times necessarily, or on television. And then the New Republic had all these problems, and the reviews stopped. And so I and a few people I knew thought we should try to fill in. And because of the web, everything's a lot easier, than with a print magazine, just to solicit reviews and to start publishing them. Although it did turn out to be a lot more work than I expected. But that was basically the reason I did it.
Is it on literature? Is it fiction and nonfiction, or?
It's both. It's just like a book review,
Okay.
basically.
Give me 3 fiction writers you really like. Or are you on the more nonfiction side?
No, I read both. I really like Sebald. I've forgotten his first name. This German. He
Right.
wrote Austerlitz.
Right.
Austerlitz died a number of years ago. Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I used to read a lot of him.
Who are you reading now?
Philip Roth. What am I reading? I've been reading a lot of American history now. I've been trying to figure out the moment,
Right.
the current moment. I've been reading a lot of, there's a very good book by Sean Wilentz, a distinguished
Yes.
historian, about sort of the rise of democracy. And I'm interested in this for reasons that will not surprise you. I'm interested in the history of populism in the United States.
You ever read Richard Goodwin's book, The Populist Moment?
I probably read that a while ago, but I should go back.
You maybe and C. Van Vidwart's book, The New South, which that era of writing.
Right.
If that's the topic.
Sure. No, I'm less interested in the South, although there is a lot of populism there, the Huey Long.
Right.
And, if we separate ourselves from the present moment, I think one does have to acknowledge that there is this kind of rich tradition of populism in the United States, which is not all bad. There are elements of it.
Be it political or economic.
Yeah. Well, and the notion that sometimes the parties and the elites are not taking seriously the concerns and economic interests of ordinary people. I mean, that's a real problem, and that's what gives rise to populism.
Well, since you're studying it, I didn't mean to do this, but since I actually am interested in this subject, and what makes you think when you that, because people use populism, and I actually think there's more to what Trump's doing than populism, which is, where does patriotism end and nationalism pick up?
Right. So I think there's populism, and I think there's demagoguery. And I think Trump is both a populist and a demagogue. I don't think populism necessarily implies demagoguery. And the difference is, so a populist is someone who basically thinks the political system is corrupt. The whole political system is corrupt. I don't think that's usually the case, but I can understand why people think that, especially when things go terribly wrong, as they have recently. A demagogue is a person who tries to ride on the wave of populist discontent, and what distinguishes the demagogue is that they'll basically say anything. They'll cause divisions. They'll attack important institutions like the courts and the press in order to get elected. And I think demagogues are very dangerous, whereas I think populism can have, as movements, can have beneficial effects.
I mean, would you put Father Coughlin a populist or a demagogue?
He was a populist demagogue, definitely. Yes.
Both.
Both.
Okay. Yeah. Huey Long.
A populist demagogue. Yeah.
George Wallace.
Populist demagogue. Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Populist
Oh,
demagogue.
I was just going to say
but
demagogue.
The first president, what?
I was just going to say a demagogue. I was going to leave populism.
Well,
when you look at the tax bill, you can't really say he's a populist.
That is true. So I should say he ran as a populist.
Right.
But I think this is always a problem for populists. Once they're in office, they don't really know what to do. Because if you think if the whole government is corrupt, and that everything that both parties have wanted to do is corrupt, well, what is the right thing to do? And it's actually never been clear. So once the populist who gets power is like the dog who catches the fire truck. He's got the power and he doesn't know what to do with it. And Trump, Trump has, I think he's actually, as president, weaved back and forth between doing what the sort of Republican elite wants him to do, and then from time to time, just attacking all of our institutions, which is not a constructive thing to do, but that is the sort of populist demagoguery aspect.
I was going to turn to one other thing, but to leave this, I actually think the best way to describe his tax bill is he's rewarding his donors to give him the shaft to his voters, which is why I think he's more demagogic than populist.
Yes, as president,
yes,
the populism has fallen away to some extent, right?
What I do, the little I know of academia, unlike my older brother, there's a fierce competition for talent. Clearly, with all your writing and your background, you must be wooed regularly. So what keeps you in Chicago?
Well, a lot of
ultimately,
things.
this is about Chicago.
Yeah,
although I was getting a lot of emotional high as we were talking about the Logan Act there. Do you think that is inappropriate for me to wish for that for the 8th day of Hanukkah?
I think it's perfect.
For the 8th day, the last day?
Right. Yeah. No, I grew up in Chicago, and I really like the city. I'm a city person, and Chicago I think is the only real city in the U.S. aside from New York and possibly Los Angeles in the sense of the diversity and the density and the things to do. And I really like the university, which and the law school where I am, because I just think they're both terrific. And my wife loves Chicago as well.
Is she from Chicago?
She's not from Chicago, so
You guys
for
meet
her,
in law school?
Pardon me?
Did you meet? It's none of my
in
business.
college. We met in college, and I had to persuade her to come here. Now that she's here, though, she doesn't want to leave.
The
So.
winter's keeper.
The winters,
They're a keeper.
the traffic. But
Where did she grow up?
she grew up in two places. She grew up in Ithaca, New York, and then in Little Rock, Arkansas. And
You got to be kidding
She
me.
knew your boss, your former boss.
Yeah.
She almost babysat for Chelsea Clinton.
Oh, wow.
And I know slightly your other former boss. Clinton wasn't your boss, right? You was? Yeah,
I was a senior advisor.
you were his senior advisor. That's right. Because when I was in law school,
I must have left a really big impression on you.
Sorry, it was a while back. Barack Obama I was in law school with him, so I know
law
both
school
of
with
your.
him.
Yeah, I mean, I knew him slightly. We
Did you
weren't
guys-
pals, but
Did you guys do the law review together, or did you?
no. But we were in a class together where he actually defended me when the teachers got mad at me. So I'm grateful for him still.
Did he get an A or you get an A?
I got an A. He didn't tell me what his grade was.
But you love. Do you live in? It's none of my.
I live in Hyde Park, yeah.
But you love the city.
Yes, I do.
And your kids are all students here.
Well, my older son's gone off to college in the East Coast, and my younger son's
Congratulations.
in high school here. And they both love Chicago, and they may very well stay here as well.
Well, this is going to improve your Chicago roots now. We're about to go to the fast set of questions here.
Okay.
You ready?
Okay.
Okay. Cubs or Sox?
Sox. South side.
Well, forget it. Never mind. The entire interview's over here. All right. Lake or river?
Lake.
Thick or thin pizza?
Thin. I don't eat pizza anymore.
Oh, okay.
I've gotten.
Okay. Hancock or Willis Tower / Sears?
Hancock.
16-inch, 12-inch softball.
I think I'd hurt my arm with 16-inch, so I'm going to go with 12-inch.
Okay. We're with Professor Posner, Chicago Stories, and talking about both the obstruction of justice, prosecuting a president, and the Logan Act. Thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Have a happy and a healthy new year.
You too.
Thank you.
You're listening to Chicago Stories with Mayor Emanuel. You can subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts and tweet your guest ideas using #ShyStories. Thanks for listening.